Hello, and welcome back to Overdetermined's Elden Ring lore through. This is episode 7. Last episode, we met Sorceress Selene and bought some spells from her that we're never going to use. Full disclosure, this is future me narrating past me. I recorded this episode, and then at the very end realized that my actual microphone was not recording. And Elden Ring's got one save, of course, so I couldn't revert the save back to where we left off last time. So my best option here was to talk back over myself, which is a very different experience than being reactive to what's happening in the world as I'm playing it. I suspect I will be a bit more rambly than I am otherwise. We are still using the flail here, and we grabbed the glintstone staff, which I expect I will be reading momentarily. This is a staff with a glintstone embedded at the tip, a catalyst for casting sorceries. Sorceries must be memorized first to the site of Lost Grace, and a staff must be equipped to cast them. And I believe I go look up. Was that exact dialogue? Could I cut this? Could I cut this part? Probably, but I've already got it. Glintstone is the amber of the cosmos. This is what Sorceress Selene just told us last episode. Glintstone is the amber of the cosmos. Golden amber contains the remnants of ancient life and houses its vitality, while glintstone contains residual life and thus the vitality of the stars. So we got the vitality of the stars here that is granting us the magic of this world. Not the life of the stars, right? The vitality, which I don't know, a notably different thing. As I think through it a bit, a lot of this game is obsessed with taking power from life. Like here, we are looting coffins that contain the power of those dead and buried inside, like that dude. So the vitality of the stars, I don't really know what I'm trying to say, just that vitality I think is something different to life. And vitality, I think, is the thing that empowers much of the world, that the logics of the world revolve around, I suppose. Here I am, about to die from some bats. Miraculously don't. I think we grab some more of these runes that I'm picking up here. That's our first golden rune 2, I believe, but it has the same flavor text description. Golden rune 3 has something different. Even now, runes are still imbued with the power of life itself. Do you see the Erd tree towering over? Even now, runes are still imbued with the power of life itself. So something has happened that would lead you to believe that runes aren't empowered with the power of life. And again, we get just what we were talking about, right? Where life and vitality are the power of this world, or where you can derive strength of this world. Not really sure what that means thematically, but I suppose we will check that out as we continue on. I sure am standing still. There we go. Jump forward a little bit. We're still collecting these runes from these coffins that have been looted by the scavengers of this world. On the side of the coffin, there is some robed figure. That's either hair or what's the word I want? Not a cowl, like a hat, like a robe hat. You know what I mean. Or clutching some kind of tablet to their chest, it looks like. A figure, I would say, of indeterminate gender and sort of indeterminate origin. Here I am trying to decide what I'm going to do with the episode. There is... Well, I guess we will see in just a moment. There is a camp right up here that we will now spend some time raiding. Recording back after the fact like this, I'm learning, is a very different process. Very different... Well, I don't want to sound like intellectual, but very different way in which I interact with myself and I interact with the game. There's a slide of Greystone there that we're going to sort of run towards. Get out of the way of this Kaiden horse rider man. The title of this video is Flying Dragon Agheel, as you've guessed. So momentarily we will be fighting that. Momentarily, in like 30 minutes or whatever, we'll be fighting that boss. Of course, I am recording this after I've recorded the. I'm recording this after the fact, but I have yet to really think through the boss. This is Agheel Lake North. I believe this is it. We're about in for a surprise. This is what I was talking about last episode, kind of. Where one of these guys. I say nope. Is it you? Is it you? It's none of you. Oh, okay, never mind. What was I saying? I don't know what I'm going to say about Flying Dragon Agheel. I start off, at the very end of each of these episodes, I think to myself, well, there's nothing interesting to say about that boss. What am I gonna sort of do? Is it him? Yep. And I don't do any damage against this bear. Goodbye. Time to leave. Oh, not quite. I do more damage than I think I remember doing. I think that was a doable fight, although it would have been quite annoying and taken up a lot of time. And for what? I don't even remember if he drops anything. A larval tier? Larval tutor, perhaps? Anyways, so we're going to raid this camp, and I'm going to talk a bit more about the process, I guess, where, like I said, I always don't think that... can I ring that trap as well? I always don't think that I have anything interesting to say about the boss when I finish, and then I stare at a Microsoft Word document for, like, a couple hours, and then just jot some notes down, and then I think to myself, this isn't interesting. I should just not do it. And then eventually I get there. That's how I started the Archery Burial Watchdog script process, for instance. I was like, there's nothing interesting to say about it. And then I produced something that in the end I think I was actually quite happy with. Sort of taking the design as a avenue through which to think about something greater in life. Which is, sort of what I was intending to do with the series anyways. So sort of finding that that mode of interacting with the game. I have another thought, but I'm not going to start it because I have something to say about the item we're about to see. This is a Starlight Shard, which is an ephemeral sliver that gives off a pale blue glow, what remains of a passing flash of starlight, used to gradually recover FP. A prized item that was once used in the Eternal City as an ingredient in intoxicating draughts. This is a really interesting piece of Elden Ring because it shows that the light itself can become tangible or something you can pick up, right? A lot of this game blurs the line between what is tangible and what is intangible, what is metaphorical and what is literal. And that item really represents that idea where starlight is something that you can touch and break. Really not like too I don't think I do it now, but the animation for breaking it isn't too dissimilar from breaking a rune arc, which is something similar. Yeah, I'm showing off the quote unquote sunlight, archery light, I suppose, rays of gold that are emanating from the archery as also something physical. The starlight presumably was gathered by this. What is it called? The wiki calls them stone astrolabes. Oh, here I am. As always, admiring the multi-layered view. Stone astrolabes, which have a sort of spike in the middle. If you look at what an astrolabe looks like, it's not like super similar to what this is. I wonder if I can find a royalty-free image. I could, and as you see, they don't resemble astrolabes at all. Instead, while I was googling around, I did find someone on Reddit, Dat Chicken Man. Thank you, Dat Chicken Man, who very compellingly just points out that these aren't stone astrolabes, like full stop. They are instead a hemicyclium, hemicyclium, I think. But they're a type of sundial, and it just looks exactly like this. I'll add a link in the description. But it's just a sundial used to measure time, and in this context, we can safely assume that it's used to measure the position of a star, or mayhaps the moon, as we may find out later. So it's just an instrument for studying where the moon is. Because originally, right, sundials are used to measure time, right? It's an instrument that, based on where the sun is positioned in the sky, casts a light and a shadow in one particular place. I don't think I've seen anyone really online talk about why someone would want to do that with the moon. Perhaps the moon is just the primary light source in this world. The item description, can you see the Erd tree towering over? I think lends further credence to the fact that the Erd tree is a kind of illusion. So if that's true, then we're the only ones seeing the rays of gold in the light. Perhaps it's just coming from the moon. Especially because, I suppose, I'll save it for later, but the Nox used it as intoxicating drops, I believe. Again, suggesting that there's this relation between nighttime, the Nox, which means night in Latin, and sleep. Also interesting that this, hemicyclium, what's the word I want? Brings the light together, focuses the light, there's the word, into something that can be tangible and picked up, that falls at the edge of the hemicyclium there. So food for thought there at the least. And I'm sure I'll talk more about that later in future episodes. But here we are murdering some nobles, wandering without bereft of purpose. And here we are, about to die. Uh-oh. Yep. Die to one of these Kaiden folks. I actually die several times, and I'm going to cut here. This is... I'll go back and find it, and you'll see it on the screen. I think this is 3 deaths later. When I realize I can use the bow to lure one out at a time. As well as my lovely sorcerer. But these guys, I don't typically fight them in a regular, quote-unquote regular playthrough. So I just don't really know their movesets. I don't think that they're mini bosses anywhere. They're just harder field enemies who dropped their gauntlets. That would have been cool if I had them. My sorcerer is sort of doing nothing here, but that's alright. He's drawing aggro, which is all I need from him. I mean, the way I've done this, yeah, I do kill the horse, but I didn't need to. And I can never remember what happens if you kill the man but not the horse. Yeah, they got quite the moveset. But I killed him. And I believe now we read the Kaiden Gauntlets. Nope. Past me needed to get his runes. And there's a chest here that we can finally loot. The whole reason we're sort of in this mess at all. And we grab the Great Epee. I looked up how to pronounce this. It's Epee, I think. No, I don't remember. It's been about a week since I actually played. But I believe there's like multiple pronunciations. So if you're in America, or you're speaking the Patriots English. And you can just sort of do whatever you want. These guys have a really nasty range. It's just annoying. No other enemy in the game that I can think of has quite that range. Here I try out the Great Epee, which requires 20 strength. No, 15 strength, of which we have 10 or something like that. But it's cool as shit. So here I am wondering if I should level 5 more points into strength or not, just for the cool sword. Of which the answer I think is yes. Because of the nature of this playthrough, going through every single boss, going through all the field enemies, we're going to be over leveled pretty quickly, and so I am more than happy to spend runes on like fun stuff, like a couple points into strength when we're looking just to primarily be arcane and dex, and faith, and vigor in mind, or buying sorceries that we can never use. All that seems fine to me. And that one hits the or one attack stance breaks the Electric soldier there. I'm forgetting how to speak. There we go. Murder the cowering noble. And I got my runes back, so I know that everyone here has died. And we got a pretty great view here of the rest of this part of Limgrave. Down there, I believe, is the Scary Bear. And I know we do at some point read those Kaiden Gauntlets. I guess not soon. I'll jump back up here. We'll go back down that way at some point. I have to say that those sideways... I think I've said this before. I know I've said this before, but those sideways tombstones are just so compelling to me. They're so like intentional, right? They're old, intentionally placed, I mean, by the developers. They're old, and suggest that the land itself has moved around in such a way that, or that someone has moved the land, I suppose, is a better way of thinking about it. Like I said, though, just extremely compelling. Over here is a fire burning, which always means that it's a point of interest, right? Something for you to come take a look at. And here we got a sliver of meat. And over here, we can finally get an answer, I think, to one of the questions that we were talking about at the Gatefront Ruins, which is, who are they guarding the gate from? And the answer here, pretty clearly to me, seems to be demi-humans. You can see these are two factions that oppose one another. They're both intelligent enough to mindlessly attack one another, I suppose. Like, just barely intelligent enough, I should say. And easy to murder in this situation. Everyone's dropping a lot of different items for all overdetermined. Okay, here we go. We've read some items. This is a ruined fragment, a rainbow stone. So ruined fragment is a stone fragment found near places where ruins have fallen from the sky. These shards of stone are believed to have once been part of a temple in the sky. They glow with a faint light from within. And this is a stone such as these shine with the colors of the rainbow, making them useful markers when placed on the ground, can be dropped to gauge the distance of a fall, once used to entertain children on the fringes of the lands between. The fact that the demi-humans drop them to me suggests that fringes is a like societal thing, right? Like the demi-humans are on the fringes of society, and so they are playing with the rainbow stones, which makes sense, I guess. I believe we're gonna go grab this side of grace. We do a lot of things in this episode. No, we're gonna go talk. Nope. Yes. We're gonna talk to this man over here. There is just a beautiful view right here, huh? Hello. Who knows what I'm thinking there? I suppose judging where I'm meant to go here. There he is.
Ah, you must be the new Tarnished. You do well to steer clear of Agheel Lake, fledgling. A dragon roosts there, and it's as fearsome as it is majestic. So, unless you're mad, or wish to be burned alive, stay clear of the lake.
So we're told not to go to the lake, and of course, well, what else are we gonna do? And that becomes our new destination, in line with trying to play the game as intended, right? Where someone gives you a quest, or in this case, tells you not to do something, and you can go ahead and do it. One thing about FromSoft quest design is sometimes characters tell you to do things and you shouldn't. Sometimes characters tell you not to do things and you also shouldn't. Sometimes characters tell you to do things and you should. Look at that view. And it's up to you to figure out which one is which. Of course, I will take out the HUD and just take in this gorgeous view. Like I said, the entire game so incredibly cinematic. Just a delight to travel through every single time. I wonder what I'm saying here. I guess I'll say something else, which is I was talking about the process of making these videos, where I beat the boss, I finished the video, I finished the like first recording part, and then think to myself, oh my god, how am I going to say anything interesting about the boss that I just defeated? I had that with the Erdtree Burial Watchdog. I really had that with the Mad Pumpkinhead, where I sort of sat around for a while, got the Ash of War Unsheathed, or like a long while, trying to figure out what was interesting to say. Got to the juxtaposition of the Mad Pumpkinhead and Selin, which seemed pretty intentional, and then just sort of went from there. Had an epiphany while I was out walking and listening to a podcast, in fact, about what their designs say about their social lives, or extreme lack thereof. It's nice that these crabs can hit one another. I also believe that this is a like 1-to-1, maybe not 1-to-1, but like 1 to 1.1 analog of the giant crabs from Dark Souls 3, which is just kind of fun, I suppose. You can say that I am extremely not used to the movesets. This is another enemy that I typically just don't bother dealing with, because why would you? They're little like spider fangs. I don't like them. Don't like him at all. Impaling thrust? Nope. Die instead. Jesus Christ. Great. And we got some crab eggs, I believe. Again, extremely not worth the effort. And a turtle hiding in the bushes there. Anyways, I'm in that spot right now with Flying Dragon Agheel. It is no spoiler, I suppose, that is the boss over this episode. Where I have no idea whatever is interesting to say. But this is interesting. This is the Skill of Swordsman from the Land of Reeds, which is a separate place from the Lands Between, we assume. Which I believe is our first indication that there is a world outside of this world. And the crab eggs of large crabs which dwell in these shallows. A nutritious foodstuff that warms from within. The flavor is exquisite. Only those of comfort and means know the truth. A crab's eggs are more delectable than its meat. We can safely assume that they have comfort and means because it is quite difficult to grab crab eggs. We also see the beast liver. Difficult and expensive, I should say. The fresh liver of a beast, a luscious fruit of life. Dried liver boosts damage negation, and the chitin gauntlets. These hulking, fearless mercenaries, said to hail from the mountaintops of the wintry north, are adept at fighting on horseback. Caden is the name of their home settlement. They hail from the mountaintops of the wintry north, which is reflected, I think, in their design pretty well. And here I am wondering, if we ever reach the mountaintops in the wintry north, we should keep an eye out for what could have once been their settlement, because obviously they are here now as once was mercenaries, we can assume, but like everything else in the Lands Between, have long since lost their minds. Here we are avoiding this man. I think going to find a site of grace that's right around here. So there's the site of grace. The thing that's ticking in the back of my mind, like just as I go through my daily life, right? Like, what is there interesting to say about Flying Dragon Agheel? It's a fun little challenge, right? Like I could sort of skip through the game just to find something that's definitely interesting to talk about, right? Like the Grafted Scion is a dense text, right? Here I am trying to decide if I want to level up strength to one-hand the greater pay. The answer is no. The Matin Pumpkinhead isn't so much a dense text. It's just an extremely tragic figure that doesn't have a ton else to say besides its tragedy. Flying Dragon Agheel, also, I don't know. Like, maybe I will end up figuring something out about. Dragons are very often portrayed in fantasy, and how this one is portrayed as compared to some other dragons, both in the other FromSoft games and the fantasy genre as a whole. I think I'm losing my voice. We are only halfway through the talking portion of this episode. There's a way to get right there. There's like controlled falling, but I don't remember what it is, and I don't think there's anything like interesting to get there either. Talk about a boss with rich text. This guy's got a lot to say, but he shows up as a boss later, and we will see him when we see him with his cool sword. Made trivial by the impaling thrust. Ash of War there. I do like the sound design that FromSoft has for characters that can talk but won't speak English, right? Got Ash of War Gravitas. Skill originating from the Alabaster Lords who had skin of stone. Thrust the armament into the ground to create a gravity well. And that's the skin of stone that we see there. Again, much to say about those, but in the interest of keeping ourselves at least a little bit focused, we'll leave that for another episode. Another crab there, which I think I don't fight, because why would I? And I just have a way to go there that maybe I'll have to check out next episode. I don't think there's anything else around here. There are some wrecked canoes, some very old and decayed canoes. But other than that, really nothing. Spirit Spring up. And really this beautiful little aqueduct area. What's this place called? Seaside Ruins. Really compelling. Paints a compelling image of what this area must once have looked like. Here we are at, I believe it's Agheel Ruins. No, Dragon Burnt Ruins. And I'm trying to be sneaky because we can hear these guys over here chanting. And a dog bothering us. There it is. They say Agheel, oh Agheel, and then I think it's the eternal flame of Agheel. We'll see if we can get closer. Okay, I've looked it up. I'm looking at the raw text dump of the game now. They are saying Agheel, oh Agheel, ... feral flame of Agheel, burn true. Just in terms of adding a richness to the world, this is really fun, I think. There aren't really any other regular enemies that sort of chant like that. And I think it's a really lovely addition to the game that I wish they had done in other places as well.
Agheel, oh Agheel.
We get the sense that some sort of cult has popped up here. Even in Undeath, these individuals are still worshipping this Agheel of Agheel Lake. The feral flame is interesting to me. When I first heard it, I thought it was eternal flame, which makes a bit more sense. In a game worried about eternal life and eternal death and eternal suffering. But it's feral flame, suggesting that there's something about the ferocity of the flame is worth thinking about, considering in whole, I guess. The most compelling and easiest way to think through it is, I think, these people want to die. The Erd Tree roots aren't accepting them anymore. Embarrassing. And so the flame itself is purifying or cleansing in a way that these people long for a finish, an end. Got some Trina's lily. And they're still dropping Erd Tree flowers, so they're still I get that these are base entities that always have that drop, but all the same, these are still Erd Tree faithful, you could say. Here's an item with a rat. A stone sword key. Which breaks the seal on imp statues, but remains embedded in the statue after use, meaning it can only be used once as an item. Think well before using one. There's a Zilly the Witch video I think about a lot, which when you create an open world game like this, you need a reason for players to explore the open world. And so you need to artificially create things with one-use properties, I suppose. Or else a player just gets the gear that they want and then doesn't have any reason to explore the rest of the world, right? And I think the Stone Sword keys are one of the ways in which this game does that, as well as the Rune Arcs, which is a shard of the Shattered Elden Ring. Grants the blessing of an equipped Great Rune upon use. Even if no Great Rune is equipped, it will slightly increase maximum HP upon use. The lower arc of the Elden Ring is said to be the basin in which its blessings pool. Perhaps this shard originates from that very arc. The lower arc of the Elden Ring is said to be the basin in which its blessings pool. Blessings pool. Again, this like literal, figurative, and in almost any religion, blessings, like you said, blessings upon you, and that's not like you're not throwing something at someone, right? It's a figurative or spiritual thing. But again, in this game, what is spiritual and what is quote unquote real or tangible are weird. Sometimes things are both. Sometimes things are neither. Sometimes things are one or the other, but not the one you would expect. But the Elden Ring itself has a rune in which it's blessing, a basin in which its blessings pool, which is interesting because the blessing is the Elden Ring, right? I don't know. Lots to consider there, which we will do in the future. Those of you who have played this game before are thinking to yourselves, "Stop! Don't!" This is a trapped chest that brings you to another area of the game, which was fun to encounter on your first blind play. Like so fun to encounter on your first blind playthrough. But for keeping this series a little bit focused, I'm not going to take it. Maybe I will at some point just to show what it does, but it takes you to a much harder area than what we are in right now. And I don't think there's any lore, any like world reason for that to be there really, except it's a fun joke that the developers pull on you. I am looking now for a... Is it here? Nope. Is it here? Nope. Another pathway down. Each of these ruins has a staircase down that gives you something valuable. And this one has a fake out one and then a real one. And this real one contains a twin blade. Which is a sword with blades on both sides of the hilt. This weapon is difficult to wield and demands high dexterity, which we have. Can be wielded with a single hand, but its true strength is unlocked with dual-handed spinning attacks. It's a very cool weapon. In my second ever playthrough of Elden Ring, I just grabbed this and took it to the very end game. I believe I equip it now because we can beat the stat requirements, and it's still pretty flashy, unlike the sort of goofy flail or the sad dagger. And it's a weapon that doesn't look goofy as you're like running with it too, which is really the most important part here. Like I said, I'm not looking to optimize this build at all, really. I'm just looking to do whatever's coolest. And if I die more than I normally would for optimizing a build, that's fine, because that just gives me more opportunities to pick up drops from enemies. I've never looked at what these guys are doing here, but they are burning someone presumably alive, because death doesn't really exist in this world. And they are worshipping that act of immolation. You can sort of assume that these people are perhaps there by choice, but that's the fire there is a very, I think, compelling image. And perhaps one that has something to say about Agheel as well. Right now I am looking for Yura's summon sign, which I know happens around here. What I'm about to find out is that it's not anywhere around here. So I think I'll just cut here. Here we are, having given up, and we are running towards these folks who immediately die. But I've never actually got hit by him. I don't know why I thought that wouldn't happen. These dudes run away from their god, which is kind of funny. This is a challenging fight if you are just starting out the game. But there's so many dragons in this game that you really get their attack patterns down pretty quickly. And I'm not doing this optimally. I just go after the head whenever I fight a dragon because that seems to be the easiest. It does a little bit more damage, I think. Speaking of damage, and I believe definitely does more stance damage. So another death. I won't get too ahead of myself before the back half of the video, but the idle animation of the dragon here, with the like tail sweeping behind it, is really like animalistic to me in a way that I really appreciate. And the way that it like bends its head down. I don't know. I kind of love it. I don't want to say like cat-like, but it is certainly like predator-like. But I'm gonna go talk to Agheel. I mean, Yura.
You bloody half-wit. Picking a fight with a dragon. Well, I can tell you want to see it through. Seems I'm forever crossing paths with hotheads like you. I can tell you want to... Fools will be fools. Fight all the dragons you like. I can tell you fools will...
So now his summon sign is visible, in fact. They're usually around a statue of Mariko or a stake of Mariko or something. And I am summoning all the NPCs here just for fun, just because it seems like what you should do on a lore playthrough. Yura, Hunter of Bloody Fingers. Again, super like animalistic. That was muscle memory of trying to use torrent to get away from that, but you can't use torrent if you have summoned someone else into this world. And just barely hit that fire there. Yeah, that like roar again, super like natural. I don't know. I suppose if I think about it for a while, I can say something interesting about the character design there. The most thing, the top thing I noticed, I suppose, while I was doing this fight, is that Agheel's eyes are identical in color to the rest of his body, to the point that it almost looks like he doesn't even have them. You don't see a pupil, you don't really see anything. It's just near stone like the rest of them. And the only other quote-unquote dragon we've encountered is that corpse that we saw in the Church of Dragon Communion, which was turning to stone. And like I said, these attacks are pretty easy to dodge once you get the hang of them, especially those stomps there. And this would kill me, but typically that's a pretty easy dodge. You're not really doing much. Except grabbing aggro, which is why he's here. Even there, it almost looked like his eye was shut closed there for a second. Agheel Lake 2 suggests that this is its territory, right? That this is a territorial animal, which is funny for someone to worship, right? Something that can't even conceive of the fact that it is being worshipped. I was thinking about trying to bait out all of his attacks, and then did, and then and then it went poorly. One thing I wish was different about this fight was the environment, because there's just so much clipping through the ground that this large enemy sort of necessarily does. Which I don't love. And that was also something that a lot of people were talking about on like day 1 or 2 of the game as well. You can sort of bait him up to the cliffs behind you, and then sometimes he just like falls forever and dies. Especially when he like tries to reposition himself. That was a curious way to run against that attack, but it seemed to work. Like that. It just feels like maybe it could have been a bit more of a flat arena. But he's dead. Nope. Almost dead. I'm dead. You're going. Great enemy felled. And we get the Dragon Heart. So before this video ends, we will go talk to Yura, and we will go to the Church of Dragon Communion now that we have a Dragon Heart with which to commune. Right, but first we will read the Dragon Heart. This is a Dragon Heart seized by a Dragon Tracker, which is us, I guess. Riddled with a gravel stone, this grotesque organ continues to beat vivaciously. An offering used in the Dragon Communion. Consume a dragon's heart at the altar to make its power yours. While a terrible and savage-looking thing, the heart has a peculiar beauty to it. Again, this theme of life after death and life being power, where you are consuming not only the heart but the vivacious heart, the life in the heart. We'll go talk to Yura.
There you are. That was my first dragon hunt in quite some time. Paired up with a hothead like you, it was just like old times. Now that you've so impressively felled that dragon, there's something you should know. The heart you brought back. It's used in Dragon Communion. If you should find yourself overcome by hunger for the heart, yearning for its strength, then seek the decrepit church on the little island off the western coast. You must not forget, though, those who partake in Dragon Communion will one day shed their humanity, their hunger for dragon, their yearning only worsens until the floodgates burst, unleashing eternal torment, the strength of a mighty dragon. Magnificent, but deadly. It's no surprise that Dragon Communion is ruinous. You must not forget that those who partake hunger for until the floodgates burst.
Yura, of course, has his point of view
no surprise
that Dragon Communion is ruinous, and those who consume dragon hearts will one day shed their humanity. Again, to this theme of consuming life isn't desirable, or it comes with unpleasant consequences. But who cares? Let's go eat a heart. But before we do, this dragon itself, again, this like dragon priest turning to stone, makes you wonder the life itself of the dragon, right? Its heart turned to stone, itself turned to stone. Its life force that seems so potent. Where'd it go? I don't know. Here I learned that we need faith to cast all these spells. And I buy one of them anyways. With a really gross sound effect. But that is a stretch goal for us, let's say. This is Dragon Maw. Transforms caster into a dragon to bite enemies before them. Incantation of those who have hunted dragons and feasted upon their hearts. Theirs is a pure and overwhelming power. Again, using the power of a dragon to become a dragon, the life of a dragon to become a dragon, the transfer of the life from the dragon to yourself. Little parasitic of us in a way. This power, this life force, is I think the most compelling thing behind this region's downfall. But I will talk more about that later. But for now, here's what I have to say about Agheel the Flying Dragon. So I will talk about Agheel's design, but before I do that, I want to zero in on these three guys right here, because their existence baffles me. As best I can tell, they are either victims of or willing participants in a minor cult that appears to have sprung up in Agheel Lake. The cult is made up of wandering nobles who we know are the pitiful product of unending life. When we first chance upon the dragon-burnt ruins, we can hear them chanting.
Agheel, Agheel, oh Agheel.
We can't hear what these guys are chanting, or if they're chanting at all, because the second we see them, they are summarily executed by the combination of Flying Dragon Agheel and gravity. The cultish nobles have congregated in the dragon-burnt ruins. Telling a story from environmental clues is always tricky, but I think the story here is that they sort of mope around these ruins after Agheel burnt them. Given their fascination with Agheel's flame, it's not a stretch to suppose that these ruins are a holy site for these nobles. The ruins were burnt by Agheel's dragon flame, and the undead nobles, desperate for that flame, flocked to the cinders like moths to cinders. Considering the nobles are a pitiful product of unending life, we can reasonably assume these nobles are desperate for an end. They believe they can find that end in Agheel's flame. This cult is, in fact, so desperate to be bathed in Agheel's flame that they appear to be in the process of sacrificing their own in a ritual. If we take that at face value, it makes the function of death in the lands between even more confusing. We know natural death is foreclosed to these creatures. We know that a proper death means returning to the Erd Tree, and we see that proper death in action. It's gruesome and seems painful, but those bodies are decidedly dead. So then, the Erd Tree roots have some special property that allows them to grant a living thing death. This cult seems to believe that Agheel's flame has that property as well. If they are burnt alive by Flying Dragon Agheel, they will finally be released into oblivion, or so they believe. So then, it's mildly horrifying that the nobles are sacrificing their own, because they are not actually being sacrificed. They are being burnt alive without the ability to die. They will lose the ability to speak and will at some point mercifully lose everything but their own skeleton. But they will remain. So this is an extreme attempt at summoning Agheel. These nobles really want to die. This leads us to our next question. Why do the nobles think that Agheel's flame will grant them the release of death? Throughout Elden Ring, I can't really find strong evidence to support that. In fact, I think the game may hint at the opposite. I'm going to do something that I try not to do and talk about an item description that we haven't encountered yet in our playthrough. The item is Agheel's Flame, an incantation. The dead gazed at the skies over the lakes of Limgrave, praying that the dragon's flames would burn them to ash. Just quickly, the apostrophe placement after the S in dragons suggests there are multiple dragons in Agheel Lake, which you can chalk up to error, I think, or just consider that Agheel Lake is much bigger than we see in-game. Praying that the dragon's flames would burn them to ash. That very specifically does not say grant them death. It says burn them to ash. Now, of course, Elden Ring's world doesn't follow hard laws of physics like ours does, and instead operates on a kind of ambiguity. But all the same, I don't think there's any reason to think that the resulting ash is dead. Forgive the upcoming tangent, but this reminds me of Ursula K. Le Guin's short story, The Island of the Immortals. You should read the whole thing. It's linked below and not very long. I'll hit the main story beats for the sake of the video, but of course I'm doing Le Guin an immense injustice here, and you should just read it yourself. Here is the protagonist in the far-flung future planning a vacation and talking to a travel agent. Why is it called the Island of the Immortals? The protagonist asks. Because some of the people there are immortal, the agent responds. They don't die? I asked, never quite sure of the accuracy of my translatomat. They don't die, she said indifferently. The protagonist, intrigued, ventures to the island on a boat, where they discuss this with the captain. The captain, a man of 60 or so, had assured me that there were indeed immortals on the island. They were not born immortal, but contracted immortality from the bite of the island flies. It was, he thought, a virus. You'll want to take precautions, he said. It's rare. I don't think there's been a new case in the last 100 years, longer, maybe. But you don't want to take chances. After pondering a while, I inquired, as delicately as possible, though delicacy is hard to achieve on the translatomat, whether there weren't people who wanted to escape death. People who came to the island hoping to be bitten by one of these lively flies. Was there a drawback I did not know about? Some price too high to pay, even for immortality? The captain considered my question for a while. He was slow-spoken, unexcitable, verging on the lugubrious. I think so, he said. He looked at me. You can judge, he said, after you've been there. Once the protagonist lands on the island, they walk around a bit talking with the locals, trying to discern why everyone involved seems ambivalent about immortality. They stay at a diamond hunter's lodge on the island and eventually encounter an immortal. The sex of the poor victim was indistinguishable. Of the legs, nothing remained but stumps. The whole body was as if it had been melted in fire. Only the hair, which was quite white, grew luxuriantly, long, tangled, and filthy. A crowning horror to this sad spectacle. The protagonist then finds a tour guide who gives a practiced lecture about the immortal. For over 1,000 years, it has belonged to the Roya family. In this family, it is our duty and pride to look after the immortal. Feeding hours are 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening. It lives on milk and barley broth. It has a good appetite and enjoys good health with no sicknesses. Its legs were lost when there was an earthquake 1,000 years ago. It was also damaged by fire and other accidents before it came into the care of the Roya family. The legend of my family says that the immortal was once a handsome young man who made his living for many lifetimes of normal people by hunting in the marshes. This was 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, it is believed. The immortal cannot hear what you say or see you, but is glad to accept your prayers for its well-being and any offerings for its support, as it is entirely dependent on the Roya family for food and shelter. After some follow-up questions, the tour guide then explains the presence of diamonds on the island. There are others all around, in the ground. Sometimes people find them, souvenirs, the really old ones. Ours is young, you know. She looked at the immortal with a weary but proprietary eye, the way a mother looks at an unpromising infant. The diamonds, I said. The diamonds are immortals? She nodded. After a really long time, she said. She looked away across the marshy plain that surrounded the village, and then back at me. A man came from the mainland last year, a scientist. He said we ought to bury our immortal, so it could turn to diamond, you know. But then he said it takes thousands of years to turn. All that time it would be starving and thirsty in the ground, and nobody would look after it. It is wrong to bury a person alive. It is our family duty to look after it. And no tourists would come. It was my turn to nod. The ethics of this situation were beyond me. I accepted her choice. "Would you like to feed it?" she asked, apparently liking something about me, for she smiled at me. "No," I said, and I have to admit that I burst into tears. Finally, the protagonist wonders about how a body turns to diamond. We are a carbon-based life form, as the scientists say, but how a human body could turn to diamond I do not know, unless through some spiritual factor, perhaps the result of genuinely endless suffering. Perhaps diamond is only a name the people of the island give these lumps of ruin, a kind of euphemism. It is human to crave immortality, but it is human to die. Immortality is a curse because forever is a longer time than anyone can possibly imagine. In the logic of Elden Ring, I don't know if being burnt to ash resembles an ambiguously sentient lump of ruin, but I suspect the answer is yes. The question is, do these nobles know that Agheel's flame would not grant them the release they ache for? And I suspect the answer is no. I think they want very badly to no longer exist and, like anyone desperate, are willing to do whatever mental gymnastics they need to in order to convince themselves that they can die. Remember, the item description just says these nobles are praying to be turned to ash, not killed. That fate may be worse than the life these purposeless nobles now know. Based on how desperately this cult of Agheel is acting, by sentencing some of its members to an even more horrible life than the one they now live, it's a fair assumption that they haven't realized this truth. So, like all cults, this cult of Agheel is premised on a lie. It is premised on a hypothetical future that can never arrive. Like all good cults, the lie is so compelling that everyone involved wants to believe it. They believe they can summon Agheel, and the release of oblivion will follow, though in this stagnant world all they can do is wait and immolate fellow cult members. Funny, then, that when Agheel does show up, the nobles are stomped to death rather than cleansed by the flames. Agheel is a feral creature. Agheel is an animal that obeys only its own base instinct. They can no more compel it to cleanse them in fire than I can compel a bear I encounter in the woods to do a little jig. Unlike many enemies, including the Grafted Scion and even the Erdtree Burial Watchdog, Agheel has wholly unintelligent and almost lifeless eyes. Agheel acts territorially and impulsively. Consider Agheel in contrast with the Flame Drake Talisman's description, which reads, "The ancient dragons who ruled in the prehistoric era before the Erdtree would protect their lord as a wall of living rock." The adjective Flying Dragon, I think, separates Agheel from the ancient dragons, which are perhaps his predecessors. Still, Agheel has no lord. Agheel is a kind of lord, but doesn't know it. Agheel is not living rock. Its design does not read as especially jagged or hardened in a way that you would expect living rock to look. Interestingly, we do encounter an enemy that can be described as living rock, and it is decidedly more intelligent than Agheel, though I'll save him for a future video. Here, I'll just note that it's interesting how there seems to be intelligence in stone. That's about everything I have to say about Flying Dragon Agheel. I think this Ursula K. Le Guin story is an excellent framework for interpreting Elden Ring's specific type of death. Among other things, it does lead you to wonder if the quote-unquote dead bodies that we pick up items from are truly dead or just so old that they have lost every living impulse they had. Just as Elden Ring wants us to think about death, I think it wants us to think about life. The irony at the center of it all is after all this praying and sacrificing, once these nobles' heralded death does arrive, they run, terrified, and cower. Death is easier to contemplate, or even desire, if it is not physically in front of you. Even after all the loss of purpose and praying to be burnt to ash, when they come face to face with death, these cursed men remember. They want to be alive. I'll end on an uncertain note. Many individuals have a base want for immortality. Some days I count myself among that number. In this view, life's finitude is a curse, because life itself is just too precious a thing to have for only the short time that each of us is allotted to live. I wonder if Elden Ring and Le Guin are right. Is immortality a curse? Given the chance, after thousands of years alive and in a decaying body with barely any senses with which to perceive the world, would those extra lifetimes have been worth it? Or is the prospect of living forever too horrid a concept to even consider?